Welcome to Glove Talk, your weekly news in boxing. New episodes every Sunday. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. With that said, let's talk boxing. So as always, we are going to start with the fights of this week and kind of break some of those fights down, and then we're going to go into the news for the week and start at the lowest weight class and go to the heaviest weight class. So let's first start off with Joshua Greer versus Michael Pacquiao, and just kind of right off the bat, they obviously were doing their typical kind of hype for Greer, kind of talking about him being this great fighter, had one loss, and the way he carries around that pillow for night for his opponents and all this other stuff like that. And so, it's your typical hype for a fight like this. And then they just kind of mentioned something that was a little interesting to me. They said just off the cuff, Pacquiao from the same city as Manny Pacquiao. And I just thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then they showed his stats. His stats were very similar to when Manny Pacquiao had like his first major fight in the US against Ledwaba. And then it's just kind of similar size, similar record, similar age. I mean, just everything was kind of similar to when Manny Pacquiao made his big splash in the US against Ledwaba. They're just kind of like, oh, that's kind of neat, The similarities just happen to be kind of very close to when Manny Pacquiao kind of had his like little bit of a breakout fight. And so then, getting into the fight, you're kind of expecting still kind of lopsided because everything's been lopsided on these top ranked cards. Michael Pacquiao kind of gave me a little kind of a look like Manny Pacquiao a little bit when he fought Ledwaba. He just looked like the much superior boxer, way more heavy-handed, and just started really commanding the rim. Same way that kind of Manny Pacquiao had Ledwaba on his back foot continuously throughout the fight. Same thing with Pacquiao just continuously hit Greer with heavy-handed shots and just forced him to be on the back foot, and kind of more at distance too, kind of on his terms, similar to kind of like the Manny Pacquiao. Now, before anyone gets too crazy, and I'm not saying Pacquiao is the next Manny Pacquiao, I'm just pointing out the kind of similarities because I think it's fun to point out when kind of history repeats itself like this. So throughout the fight, there was other little similarities like early knockdown. Pacquiao had a first round knockdown against Greer, which is a beautiful left hook. If you haven't seen this fight yet, go back and watch it. It's a really striking left hook. And just out of nowhere, he whips that hook and gets it right behind the guard, and just Greer just does not see it coming. Kind of similar to how Ledwaba got knocked down with a left from Manny in the second round. All these little similarities, they're just kind of fun, I think, in terms of when history, like I said, repeats itself. So anyways, you started seeing Michael Pacquiao really dominating Greer, and Greer just didn't have an answer for it for a little bit. One thing I did want to note is that they did kind of bring up the fact that Greer oftentimes in his career was throwing around 60 punches per round, and in this fight in particular, he was throwing very low volume. I mean, they said there was in the 20s and low 30s, and that was really noticeable in comparison to Pacquiao, who was like a Manny Pacquiao, using a lot of high pressure and kind of controlling distance. So with this fight, you kind of started seeing Pacquiao really take on most of this fight, and just yet again, another knockdown, I believe in the 6th round for Pacquiao, just started looking like a very lopsided fight. Where it changed up though is that you started seeing Greer change things, and in I believe the 8th, 9th round, maybe he started getting in really close and trying to use volume punching to make Pacquiao kind of back up, and it worked. It started really working in his favor. You started seeing Pacquiao uncomfortable for the first time in the fight and not really feeling in control. So I think if Joshua Greer stuck to that plan from the beginning, high volume punching in close rather than at range, I think he would have done substantially better. From what I could see, Greer had a lot of respect for Pacquiao afterwards, and this was a massive fight for Pacquiao. Pacquiao afterwards was just like weeping on the campus. He was so happy with the win, and you really have to give it to him. The one thing that really annoyed me, and this has been something that's happened now multiple times on these top rank cards, the judges scorecards, 2 of them were very straightforward, and again, we have another scorecard that should have never ever happened. How someone had this as an even fight, I do not understand. This has now happened multiple times, and it's starting to get really embarrassing for Top Rank. And I'll get a little bit more into kind of my whole thoughts on Top Rank with these cards, but still, it's just one of those things where people are kind of scratching their head when your announcers have to kind of sit there and go, I don't know what fight you're watching. That's not a good sign. It does not make you look good. It doesn't make your judges look like they're impartial, that's for sure. So next major fight was on Thursday night, and this was supposed to be Jose Pedraza's night, but I'll get into kind of what happened there and some issues that popped up. So they ended up bumping up Gabriel Flores versus Josek Ruiz. This kind of seemed like it could be kind of an interesting fight, but yet again, super lopsided fight. Flores looked sharp. He looked like a really young prospect that had great skills, very sharp, landed some great shots. I will say that his power really wasn't able to stop Ruiz from coming forward. It really looked like Flores just was leagues ahead. It kind of reminded me a lot of the Shakur Stevenson fight, to be honest with you. And it's just, it starts to become one of those things where you're just like, just stop the fight. The one guy's just getting peppered and the other one is just having his way every single round. You're hoping for something to show that, you know, Flores could kind of overcome some challenges or be challenged at all, and it just didn't happen. People were really kind of questioning why Flores wasn't able to get Ruiz out of there, and later on Twitter, I guess that Flores said that he felt something in his back, his lower back, something seized up, felt some pain, he was fighting through pain, and people were kind of like, okay, whatever. But regardless, you know, Gabriel Flores looks like a good young prospect, and I'm excited to see where he goes from here. I think that a lot of times these guys that maybe don't normally get the kind of spotlight that they would throughout the year, this is a great opportunity. And that's one thing I have to say that is positive about this Top Rank cards and everything that they're doing right now. On Saturday night, we had Navarrete fighting. Now, I'm not even going to really talk about this fight because to me, this fight should have never even happened. When you have a guy sitting across from Navarrete who has a 13-13 record, what's the point? What's the even point of having this fight? It's embarrassing. It's a really embarrassing fight, and I'm not even going to waste my time really talking about it. So earlier I said I was going to kind of talk a little bit about Top Rank, these fights, and there is something I really do want to talk about. And now I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here, and I'm going to kind of break down some information, one fight in particular that to me stuck out beyond all these other fights that quite honestly I'm really annoyed about. So what I'm going to do, if you don't want to hear this kind of rant I'm going to go on and everything like that, I'm going to put a little bit of a timestamp so you can just go straight to the news. You don't have to listen to it, but I am going to talk about this because I think it's starting to get a little bit out of control. And then on another topic on this that really just annoys me. Remember how I said Jose Pedraza was supposed to fight and be the headline on Thursday night? Well, he wasn't able to because his opponent's manager ended up testing positive for COVID-19. You know, if this was the first time this has happened when they've kind of tried to do these fights, that'd be one thing. This is the third time in 2 weeks now. Third time in 2 weeks we've had someone in their camp test positive. And this is starting to get really annoying because you keep hearing Michael Tessitore, all these guys talking about the bubble, the bubble, the bubble. That's all we keep hearing. Oh, they're staying in the bubble, and that's how we're making sure this can happen. The bubble doesn't work. If I have to hear about the bubble one more time when you're having 3 incidents of COVID in 2 weeks, obviously your bubble's not working. This is starting to become a little bit moronic. And I really hate when the announcing teams trying to cover it up like it's not a big deal. This is a big deal. You need to figure out what's happening and why this is happening. Now they've made changes. Top Rank has said that managers aren't allowed to talk to fighters beforehand and everything like that to try to mitigate some of this. This is just not working right now. And if it continues to happen, I could see that these fights going away and just being flat out canceled, because I don't think that the Nevada, Sporting Commission is going to allow this to continue. If these things keep reoccurring time and time again, why are we having these fights? If you really can't control the atmosphere, people being tested beforehand, people being tested during, that's great. I think that's awesome. But clearly things aren't working out exactly the way they're supposed to. So they need to get this under control. Now, second thing I wanted to kind of rant about, and this is just about a particular fight and one of the kind of things I frequently talk about on this channel and in a lot of my videos. You often hear me say, when it comes to young fighters and young prospects, when it comes to matchmaking and fights for them, I keep on saying, oh, well, he's young, don't push him too hard. He's young, keep developing him. He's young, his man strength will come in. he's young, you know, like pad his record a little bit before you start putting him into the deep end. I say these things time and time again on this channel for a reason. And where that really showed that this kind of mantra should be followed by more people when it comes to the boxing world is with the David Kaminsky fight against Clay Collard, because what happened here was a classic example of really poor matchmaking, and someone on this camp, whoever decided to make this fight, needs to be fired. They absolutely need to be fired, because they didn't just make a bad match where their young prospect got exposed and got beat. That's one thing. No, they literally put their fighter in a fight that he could have severely been injured and ended his career possibly. I know that that sounds extreme, and I know some people are going to say, well, you know, they have to step up eventually. And looking at Clay Collard's, you know, background and just general record, how are they supposed to know? Well, I'll tell you how they should have known. Number one, Collard's last two major fights were against young prospects, and in both those fights, he won against those young prospects. So already right off the bat, you know that this guy has a reputation of beating young prospects. Number two, Collard, if you even watch him for any amount of time as a boxer, he is a very awkward boxer. He does not look like anyone else you'd normally see. He's not traditional in any sense. He looks very much like kind of a little bit more of his background, which is mixed martial arts and MMA. He fights like an MMA guy a lot of times, and the way his hands are down, the way he kind of strikes, the way he comes forward and just relentlessly throw punches. He has a very similar style in striking to MMA, not a traditional boxer. On top of all of that, Collard is a very tough fighter. He can take a punch, and he can take a lot of them. If you watch him, it's not hard to see that this guy's a tough guy to fight. And then number four, and this is a big one, this is what pisses me off the most about this whole situation. Later on, the purses came out for this fight, and they were put on Twitter for people to kind of look at. Dave Kaminsky made $5,000 for this fight. $5,000. That's it. He took an absolute beating in this fight. If you look at the images I'm going to put up on the screen here, these are not just, this is not a 12-round fight. This is a 6-round fight, and look at his face. This is not your standard 6-round bout kind of look. This is not how most guys look after 6 rounds. So he just got absolutely bludgeoned by Collard in this fight. So now we have a guy who's 19 years old, just took a big loss, probably destroyed his confidence, but now on top of it, he did it for $5,000. Well, he's got to give about a third of that to his team, so now he doesn't even have $5,000, and now he had to go to the hospital for a CAT scan and everything like that. So now he's in debt because he had to go to the hospital and pay medical bills. What the hell? Who made this fight? It's just really annoys me to see young prospects get ruined by poor matchmaking. This was just a really bad idea by whoever decided to make this fight. And now, I don't know, David Kaminsky might be wrecked as a fighter. So I'm sorry, I hate to go on these kind of rants. I normally don't kind of do this thing. I kind of very straightforward, very to the point with everything, but I really wanted to kind of point this out because I was just so upset at seeing this, and that's my rant. I just wanted to kind of put it out there. I really wanted to express myself about this. With that said, let's get to the news. So as always, we start with the lightest weight class and then go to the heaviest weight class with news. And the first one that we have is bantamweight, and that is going to be Inoue, talking about being here, possibly fighting in September or October. I'm always excited about this. Anytime there's an Inoue fight, I just definitely am gonna tune in. He's such a young, amazing fighter, and he's so fun to watch. So I'll be really interested who they pair him with. There's been kind of rumors about Rigondeaux being excited about this idea of fighting him. I don't know if that's actually gonna happen. Rigondeaux's also talk about fighting Donaire. So there's a couple different people, as you can see here with this article. We'll see who he ends up fighting, but regardless, I'm just always excited anytime Inoue is being rumored rumored to fight, or if he's going to be fighting anytime soon. So we'll see where he goes from there. Now moving to lightweight, we're going to be talking about Katie Taylor. I always love Katie Taylor's fights, and I'm always a big fan of her. But here we talk about who could fight maybe Katie Taylor next, and that could be a replacement for Amanda Serrano. And there's a little bit of a talk about maybe Persoon being that person. I would love to see this rematch, especially considering a lot of people, including myself, I think Persoon won that fight against Katie Taylor. This would be a great fight to have. I think for Katie Taylor's sake, I know that she got a lot of flack after that fight. A lot of people saying that she lost, a lot of people feeling like Persoon got robbed in that fight. In my opinion, she did get robbed in that fight. You know, this would be a great way for Katie Taylor to prove that she is the superior boxer and fighter if she does win. So for me, this would be a great fight. That being said, I don't think it's going to happen. I would be very surprised if Katie Taylor and Eddie Hearn allow this fight to happen. So we'll see what happens, but this would be a fun one, and I hope that they do run this back and have a rematch. Next, talking about men's lightweight, Bob Arum talking about September 19th being a date for Teofimo Lopez and Lomachenko. I think this would be great. I mean, I'm really excited about this fight being in Las Vegas compared to New York, mostly just because I think that, you know, with the way everything is, we know that right now Las Vegas, it is possible to have fights, whereas we don't know what's going on with New York, and trying to figure out that whole mess in terms of fighting and sports in New York could just be a total headache. So I'm glad that they're looking at this being in Las Vegas now compared to New York, where initially I think a lot of people thought it was probably going to be just because of Teofimo Lopez's background with Brooklyn and everything like that. But that being said, one thing that's interesting about this is where Dana White had a little comment on this fight, and that was because Bob Arum said that for this fight in particular, they might try to do a small gate. They might try to see if they can have a small crowd for this. And the reason Dana White got really upset about this is because Dana White took a lot of criticism from Bob Arum when he started doing MMA fights and started trying to figure out how to have fights and started announcing fights. Bob Arum was a big critic of him. And so basically this is kind of Dana White being like, what the hell? You said that you're, you know, criticizing me for trying to have fights. I believe they started having UFC fights in May, and now you're having your little fights, and now you're talking about putting in, you know, small gates for your fights in September, when you just told me that I was crazy for even thinking about doing this kind of stuff. So I do think that's a little bit interesting, a little bit of the drama there between Dana White and Bob Arum, which normally you just see kind of Dana White and Oscar De La Hoya go at it on Twitter. So a little interesting kind of side note to this whole thing, but everyone's excited for this fight. I am very excited for this fight. Regardless of who you think is going to win, in the end, we are going to have a unified lightweight champion. Now moving up in weight a little bit to 140. Surprisingly, Gary Russell Jr. talking about this weight class. Gary Russell Jr. for a long time was kind of staying away from even lightweight fights. He was kind of staying around the more 130, and now he's talking about fighting Adrian Broner at 140 or 147. I think this is kind of a fun fight in a way. The reason I say that is that Adrian Broner is a clown. He's a total clown, but he is interesting to see the pre-fight kind of antics that he gets into, the kind of trash talk he gets into. He certainly knows how to sell a fight. You got to give that to Adrian Broner. Whether you like the guy or not, he can sell a fight at least. Quite frankly, that's a nice pairing for Gary Russell Jr., who doesn't sell a fight very well. Gary Russell Jr. is so inactive. He fights once every year, and he's been doing it since like 2015, that I really feel like if this is going to be the one fight he has, at least it's entertaining with Adrian Broner. Adrian Broner, I don't know if he can get down to 140, to be honest with you, because, well, Adrian Broner just doesn't look like he keeps himself in too much shape outside of the ring. So I'm not sure this would actually happen, but I do think it would be fun to see Gary Russell Jr. use those lightning hands and just light up Adrian Broner. So I think that this would be a nice way for Adrian Broner to make a little bit of money so he can get his rap career going. But, you know, we'll see what happens here. Speaking of welterweight, Arum is talking about Manny Pacquiao now fighting Crawford in a blockbuster instead of fighting, you know, Triple G, because Triple G is way too big. I already said this. I've already talked about this. I still see people trying to write articles about Triple G and Manny Pacquiao fighting. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Just let it go. It's okay. It's not going to happen, guys. I think this is great. I love the idea of Crawford and Manny Pacquiao squaring up. I don't think it's really going to happen, though. Manny Pacquiao is going to want to fight someone like a Terrance Crawford, especially if there's no gate. The money has to be right for both these guys. Crawford openly said this week that he's not taking any kind of cut and pay. So if he's not going to take a cut and pay and he's going to be fighting Manny Pacquiao, how much are you going to pay him? Where are you going to have it? Are you going to have it in the US, or are you going to try to have it in a different location? I don't know, but it's an interesting idea, I thought, at least at the beginning of the week, and then things kind of changed this week. Keith Thurman then kind of came out this weekend and was talking about how he's dying for the rematch with Manny Pacquiao. I've touched on this on like previous episodes. Keith, you're not going to get the rematch. You already had your chance. You got to bring something to the table. I think Keith needs to find at least a good dance partner. Otherwise, I don't see any reason for Manny Pacquiao to fight him. So kind of moving from that direction of Keith Thurman kind of tried to stick his nose in everything. You know, Terrance Crawford did come out and say that he wants the Manny Pacquiao fight next. That's the fight that he's looking at. And I think it's probably the easiest fight to make in the sense of you're under the same promotion. But are you really going to have it without any kind of gate? That's the thing. I think you need a gate for this fight because you're going to lose a lot of money otherwise. Pay-per-view is going to do very well for this fight. I mean, Manny Pacquiao always sells a good fight, but I just don't know if that's going to be something that's actually going to happen. And that's why I started seeing other rumors like Kell Brook trying to get a fight with Terrance Crawford. I wouldn't hate that fight. That's not a bad idea. I don't know what the travel restrictions are right now, especially in the UK and the US, and how that would all kind of work out. I know that Terrance Crawford brought that up, that he was concerned that, you know, with travel restrictions, Brook wouldn't be able to come over here. So then, you know, when would you be able to even have it? I'm not sure really, but I don't hate the idea of Kell Brook fighting, you know, Terrance Crawford. And one thing that is interesting about it, that we can do the classic thing that everyone likes to do in boxing. We could sit there with Errol Spence, see how he did against Kell Brook, and then compare it to Terrance Crawford, and then kind of like make speculations on who would be the better fighter overall. You know how this game's played. Everyone does this, especially if there's some kind of opponent that's linked in any way to two fighters that people have very strong opinions about. But let's see what would happen. I would love to see how Terrance Crawford would handle someone like a Kell Brook. I think Kell Brook would give Terrance Crawford some issues at the beginning. I think what's nice about Terrance Crawford is that he adjusts well and that he would find a way to win, but I think that Kell Brook would give him a little bit of trouble at the beginning at least. What's looking like it's gonna happen to Terrance Crawford, it looks like he's gonna end up fighting Ugas. I mean, this is a good fight, and I think the big reason that we're most likely gonna see this is because I think that that's probably gonna be the most affordable fight for Bob Arum to make. You know, in the sense that he can give a big A side to Terrance Crawford. People that love Terrance Crawford, I get it. I mean, you see the skill, you see the ability as a fighter and what he's accomplished. I mean, let's not downplay that. He is a 3-weight world champion. But people are starting, like myself, to get really frustrated with who he fights. And I'm not saying Ugas is a bad fight, but it's just kind of sitting there like, when are you going to fight someone like Errol Spence, someone like a Sean Porter? I mean, when are you going to fight some of these guys? When are you going to fight Manny Pacquiao? Like, when are these fights going to happen? I know that it's looking like he's going to be fighting in 2021. It seems like he's going to lose this entire year now. So if it's going to be 2021, who are you going to fight the later half of 2021? And then you're going to go maybe and fight Errol Spence in 2022 now. I mean, it's getting to the point now where people are starting to get frustrated with the matchmaking with Terrance Crawford. And it's not Terrance Crawford's fault. I'm not putting it on Terrance Crawford, because I know Terrance Crawford talks big and is probably willing to have these fights, but he's not willing to take any kind of pay cut because he feels like he's a very high value fighter. I think he deserves a pretty good paycheck. But I'm wondering what's going on in terms of his management with Bob Arum. If that's really what's stopping him from having these big fights. Is it Bob getting in the way, or is it just Terrance wanting a certain amount of money, always wanting to be the A side, and that's why he won't make certain fights? I'm not sure, but Terrance Crawford needs to be impressive at least. If he's gonna fight guys like Kell Brook or Ugas, he needs to make sure that he makes a statement in those fights and show everybody why he is considered the best at welterweight, which is a very talented and very competitive weight class. Now going from there, we're going to move on to super middleweight and kind of middleweight a little bit, depending on where this fight could go. And that is Billy Joe Saunders, talking about some of the options he has if the fight doesn't happen with Canelo. And quite frankly, I don't think this fight's going to happen, but I am going to talk about some of the other options and what my opinion is on if he does fight any one of these three guys. So first, I like the idea of the Callum Smith fight. I think Callum Smith is vulnerable. I often feel like he is a good boxer. At the same time, I think he's beatable, and I think John Ryder kind of exposed him a little bit that he is beatable. So I would very much like to see what Billy Joe Saunders would do there. I think he fits well into 168, but personally, I like to see him down at 160, so that's why I'm a little bit more intrigued by the other two opponents. I love the idea of him fighting Andrade, just because that fight was supposed to happen, and then, you know, if you don't know already by now, he had the PED scandal, and that just didn't end up happening. And then I also think that for the British fan base, especially, you know, Chris Eubank Jr. would be a great fight. In the UK in general, that would be an easier fight to probably make happen in comparison to, you know, having Billy Joe Saunders fly over to the US and dealing with some of that kind of messy kind of ordeal of traveling. Now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way and who he might end up fighting, I think that it's kind of key to kind of point out that I don't think that he's going to get the Canelo fight. I know that they kind of had a deal beforehand, and there was this fight that was going to happen at 168, but it looked like they had a done deal for 168, and that was going to happen in the spring this year. But obviously, with everything that's going on, it didn't happen. And so then they had to kind of go back to the drawing board and kind of hash things out a little bit. And I'm guessing when that happened, Billy Joe Saunders just maybe asked for too much money, or for whatever reason couldn't meet the needs that Canelo's camp wanted. And quite honestly, I'm not surprised. I sometimes think guys that are in the UK think that their value carries over here to the US a little bit too much. Just a little bit, especially for fan bases. Your UK fan base knows you very well, but you also have to remember that your pay-per-view prices and sometimes non-existent pay-per-view prices for fights in the UK don't translate well to the US. And granted, it's nice that they're both on DAZN, so that makes it a little bit easier in terms of just promotion and makes it easier in terms of network. But at the same time, you have to look at the fact that Canelo pretty much is going to bring all of the fans in for that fight from the US. When it comes to the gate, it's gonna be all Canelo, not really a Billy Joe Saunders fan base. It's not like Tyson Fury where he brought over a lot of fans and they traveled for him. They probably can't do that for this fight. And same thing goes with like classic Ricky Hatton fans. They used to travel across wherever Ricky went, that's where they'd go. That's not going to happen with Billy Joe Saunders. Maybe I'm wrong. If I am, let me know down in the comments. You know, you British boxing fans, maybe Billy Joe Saunders does have that kind of fan base. I don't think he does, and I don't think he's as popular as he thinks he is. I think he's probably well known in the UK, but just here in the US, he's just not really a household name like some other UK boxers. So I think that for him to kind of come in and demand a lot of money, or whatever kind of circumstances that he can't make a deal with Canelo, you know, he should try to find a way to do that. I also think fan base of the UK or UK boxers not really understanding their value when it comes to sometimes the US market is this kind of statement that was made by Callum Smith's coach, talking about, you know, he wants to fight, but he's got to make a serious offer. What he offered you is a serious offer. That's probably all he's willing to give you, and he really doesn't need Callum Smith. Callum Smith needs him, and if you really think that your fighter can beat Canelo, then you should have that fight. Why? Because if you get a low offer, right, and you beat Canelo, though, your rematch is going to be huge. Look at what Andy Ruiz did. Andy Ruiz took a very low amount of money for the Anthony Joshua fight, and a lot of other people didn't take the fight because they didn't feel like they were going to get offered enough money. Look how much Andy Ruiz made in the rematch. The same thing would happen if there was a rematch with Canelo if Callum Smith won. If you really think you can beat Canelo, take what he will give you, and then the rematch will pay for itself at least a couple times over. Plus, on top of that, the news and just advertisements alone for that fighter would just go up through the roof. Whether it's Billy Joe Saunders, whether it's Callum Smith, whoever it is, I'm not saying you have to completely bow down, but think of the upside if you could really feel like you're going to win. If you really think that you have the skills to beat him, why not take the chance? It's still going to pay fairly decent, and what you could end up gaining is significantly more what Canelo gains from beating you. He might gain a few belts, but he's not going to gain more fans. He's not going to gain more money out of it. He's getting almost nothing out of it other than maybe a title or two, which he doesn't even need. So in the end, you gain a lot more from him and having a fight with him than he does from you. And that's just my general perspective on this kind of situation. Now we're going to be moving up to heavyweight, and I kind of want to start off with someone that just kind of a quick little note, and that is Jarrell Big Baby Miller's back. And he's going to be fighting on July 9th. I don't know. I'm not exactly excited. I'm not exactly excited to see Jarrell Miller come back. I'm a firm believer that if you get caught and you get caught that bad, you deserve more than a 6-month suspension. Now, granted, if they gave him a year plus at this point, he probably would have ended up waiting until now anyways. So it kind of works out in that sense. But at the same time, I'm not exactly thrilled to see him fight again. He's a big talker, but he doesn't really have much of a resume. And I really want to see what he can do, especially since who knows how active he's been. Who knows what he's ballooned up to. He's continuously gained weight in his professional career. So I'm curious to see how he does. And especially now that he's not juicing. I mean, well, we hope he's not juicing. We don't know, because there was a long time where there was no testing going on, especially during this whole situation, during the shutdown and everything else. So he could have maybe got back on it. Maybe he still is on it. I don't know. But I'm guessing at this point, you know, he's got to come clean and be clean for his fights going forward, because if he gets caught again, he's probably not going to get a little slap on the wrist like he did last time. Regardless, let's see what happens with Jarrell Big Baby Miller. So moving on to who Jarrell Big Baby Miller should have fought, but then got caught juicing, and that's Anthony Joshua, finding out that the IBF is not going to pressure him too much to have a certain fight date for Pulev and make the mandatory by X date. I think this is a very fair kind of look at everything. I think that's smart of the IBF. I mean, you just don't know what's possible right now. US and the UK aren't the same, and you just don't know where if it's going to be in one place or the other. And then on top of it, different locations. I mean, we see even here in the US, New York is still shut down, Las Vegas is open, California is still closed. I'm sure it's a very similar situation in the UK right now, where some places will open before other ones. So how this all kind of works out, whether it's, you know, maybe it's just going to be televised with no kind of gate at it, I don't know what they're going to do. But I think this was fair by the IBF to kind of allow them to have some time to figure it out. Moving on to someone that doesn't want to give any time to Tyson Fury in the WBC, and that is Dillian Whyte has taken legal action against the WBC. If you remember last week, I was talking about this, about how Dillian Whyte was getting left out in the cold by the WBC, and that this was taking forever for him to get his mandatory. This is exactly what I thought could happen. I mean, Dillian Whyte has been waiting a long time, and quite frankly, right now, even Eddie Hearns is kind of coming to his rescue, saying, you know what, he should kind of get his mandatory. And this is why you don't make deals, or at least talk about certain deals like the AJ and Tyson Fury fight, before all your ducks are in a row. There's so much in terms of moving parts and just things that need to happen before that fight can happen. I know it's exciting to kind of get up and to start talking about what it could be, but let's get some of these things ironed out first. Let's get Pulev figured out. Let's figure out what's going on with Dillian Whyte. I mean, Eddie Hearns did say that he hopes that the WBC doesn't just elevate Tyson Fury to franchise champion. I don't know how they're going to go about it. I don't think that AJ wants that. I don't think Eddie wants that. And I don't think that Tyson Fury really cares either way. He just wants to be lineal champion more than anything. So I think that, you know, for everybody, I hopefully will see, you know, Pulev gets his mandatory with AJ. Tyson Fury has his third fight, Deontay Wilder. Maybe AJ fights Usyk next, and then Tyson Fury fights Dillian Whyte, and then we end up with whoever the winner of all that is. If everything works out perfectly, you know, if everything works out, you'll have your AJ and Fury fight after all of that, probably in 2022. But as of right now, with all the things that are happening, with Usyk dragging his feet, with Joshua and Pulev, and with what's going on with, you know, Wilder not taking step aside money, and now Whyte taking legal action, there's just so many things that have to happen for AJ and Fury to fight. And the only way it makes it easier is if people drop belts where people get elevated to franchise champion. It's the only way it's possible. If AJ drops a belt, WBO, and Tyson Fury gets elevated, that's the only way this thing gets done. So much easier and makes it so much simpler. But I don't think either guy wants to lose any belts, and I don't really think they want that to happen. So with that said, I thought we'd kind of end this week on something a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more fun, something that I'm kind of curious about, and I'm sure you are too. And that is, there's news that Jamie Foxx getting ready to be Mike Tyson in a biopic about Mike Tyson. This is kind of fun. I think this is awesome. I think Jamie Foxx is a fantastic actor. I mean, if you're a fan of what he did when he portrayed Ray Charles like I did, I thought that was amazing the way he was able to do that. I've even heard him do a Mike Tyson impression before, and it was really good. I mean, it was fairly spot on. So I think that, you know, Jamie Foxx is a great candidate for this. The only thing that's a little bit weird is that Jamie Foxx is 53 years old, and if he has to play a young Mike Tyson, I don't know how they do it. Maybe they do it with some of the kind of CGI they've done with de-aging and everything like that. But one thing that did pop up is a picture of Jamie Foxx kind of sitting there by a window, and you can kind of see his physique getting ready for the role. He looks pretty good. I mean, he's starting to get that Mike Tyson look a little bit. I think Mike's still a little beefier, but you know, Jamie Foxx is excellent. I think that it'd be really fun to see a Mike Tyson biopic. I also think that Mike Tyson would probably be involved in somehow, try to not maybe be like a major part of the film, but at least try to fill in some of the pieces, kind of talk about certain elements. Maybe we get a little bit more behind the scenes stuff that you just don't hear about. Or so I think I think in general, as fans, I'm always a huge fan of Mike Tyson. I'm sure many of you are too. I love the idea of seeing a Mike Tyson biopic. If you're like me and loved what Will Smith did with the Ali movie, I thought he did a great job playing Ali. This is kind of going down that same road where Jamie Foxx looks like he could play a really great Mike Tyson. And let's be honest, you can never have too many boxing movies. So with that said, if you enjoyed this week, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for stopping by. Talk to you next week.